what they need is a little more significant than what I can provide as a supervisor.
Yeah, so being open and honest with them, like, hey, this is outside of what supervision is. And probably being upfront from the get-go would make it easier to have that conversation, should it be needed again down the line.
I think you're talking about some of the things that you're noticing with them that they might not even be noticing about themselves.
I think sometimes too, people are just looking for like some validation outside of like what they're feeling about how they're doing. So I think like for you to say that you notice certain things about how they're feeling, or that you think that it's, you know, they may need help, is enough for someone to like look back at themselves and feel like that extra support to make like a move kind of.
Yeah, I think I've had somewhat recently where like it felt like every week that we met for supervision, like the same thing kept coming up, and it would like stretch into like a lot of our time together. And so, you know, even just using that to kind of point out, like, it seems like this is something that is just continuing, right? We've talked some about it, but it's right, obviously it's still pretty pervasive. And so, you know, wondering if you've kind of thought about maybe, and at that, you know, at that point, we already had, so that was really helpful. But just kind of using that, like, hey, this is taking up a lot of our supervision time, and not that it's wrong to talk about, but maybe that's a sign that we need to kind of move in that other direction too.
I think that they know most of the time when it's overstepped that boundary as well, and they're just waiting for someone else to make a suggestion. Because most people know what a supervisor role is and know that it's not a therapy role, and so they can be sitting there and talking. And so at least with my staff, I'm just honest with them and be like, is this something you thought about doing? Would you like me to refer you? I can do that. It sounds like something you might need, and they're never shocked, you know. They're never super surprised by it, at least the people that I supervise.
Yeah, I suppose the ideal situation would be that you had an environment where everyone kind of knows STS and already knows the signs and symptoms, and obviously they're referring themselves, but even if they're not, if you've done that and you've talked about that, probably this notion of like the EAP isn't going to be a shock to them. Yeah. So that's pretty much the end of the training, but we thought we'd end with, we'll get to some of this ongoing stuff, but I wondered if, having gone through this and talked about some of these things, we could land on some activities that you guys have done or thought of to promote some resiliency in regards to STS. Or maybe something you haven't done but you're thinking of doing.
I've done like 2-on-1 supervisions where I'll pull in 2 staff that I know are close or have like been through the same situation or have the same concerns regarding one of our kids, so that then there's someone else there present when they're discussing those concerns, and they have each other outside of me and know that they can talk to each other about it as well.
Yeah,
so not necessarily
you're facilitating peer support that
not
way.
doing it all necessarily at team, because people aren't always comfortable, but identifying another staff that they are comfortable with and doing supervision together.
Yeah.
I think a lunch and learn on doing appropriate reflective supervision would be helpful.
Like maybe you have someone in mind that
potentially.
knows.
We do a lot of reflective, and I think it's very helpful for STS. I think a lot of supervisors read about it and don't know how to really facilitate it. So a lunch and learn about that would be really helpful. Write that down, Bradley.
favorite self-care activities or something and just had them around where it's visible, cause usually when you're, I mean, it seems kinda obvious, but it's obvious when you're in a good place about what you should do. When you're in a bad place, your brain just gets stuck. And you just don't feel like anything would be helpful, so it's almost like you need something around to kind of trigger you about, here's some different things that you could do for self-care, and if they're around in the environment, it kind of is speaking to the culture of this is important and take care of yourself. But I mean, I've seen like little posters of like, 50 ways you show kids love or something, but you could do the same kind of concept with self-care.
Any other comments?
The organizational assessment, are you talking about the one that FPS did?
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to have an entire organizational assessment, not just the division.
Mm-hmm.
And I think using that information to attack STS from all levels, so the financial level, the, and how we determine caseloads and all that stuff, how we are either hurting or supporting STS.
I think it'd be beneficial too to have like the self-care plan, like staff create that as part of their own evaluation process every year. Not we create it for them, but they bring that with us to them, like to their evaluation meetings, so that can always be referring back to that when maybe their evaluation goals are slipped.
It would be beneficial for that to kind of U-shape like our safety plans are, where they kind of identify like, I know I'm stressed when these things are happening with me, so that when they refer to it, they're like, these things are happening to me, and I should do my.
Yeah, I mean, we just showed you one example of how a safety plan can be structured, but I think that's a solid structure for safety plan as well.
Those surveys, what were they called, like stressor?
The professional quality of life
Yeah.
one.
It makes sense if you're gonna do it like an ongoing basis, otherwise it's just a measurement at one point in time, but to see the fluctuations. And maybe even if you scored well at a certain time, and then you could reflect on why you scored well, then and compare that to maybe a time where you don't score as well.
I'd like to see, honestly, I'd like to see that across divisions from the top to the bottom. So like, to be honest, to explore and see, an FPS, I would be curious to know what that looks like for our division, but also compared to foster care and residential and even, supervisors as well as frontline staff, that type of thing. And done.
Create a space of like, oh, what are you guys doing over there that's like working
It's working
so
well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And doing it fairly regularly, maybe every quarter or something like that. So as an agency, this is a discussion that we're continuing to have, that nobody should say, wait, what's that? Like everybody's familiar with what that is.
Any general questions that you guys have for us?
I'm curious, Brad, you talked about like the different types of trauma, like, like helping your staff, like, if somebody has, you mentioned an example of somebody having a caseload maybe with children and sexual abuse or something. I see this in some cases and probably even more than yours, more in your program, but I think what really gets to me is like, I look at the layers of the trauma. It isn't even like, oh, this kid was sexually abused. It's like sometimes it's seen the case where it's like they sexually abused by this person, then physically abused by this person, and they removed from this parent, like 4 or 5 traumas, and the kid's like 7 years old or something. Like, how do you help your staff manage some of those more, almost like layers of trauma.
Yeah, so, right, the complex trauma cases
Yeah.
where, multiple trauma types, probably, and sometimes over multiple sort of developmental stages even, right? And yeah, I mean, it is challenging, and I think part of why I really started paying more attention to that is because for my staff saying like, yeah, we're already dealing with multiple trauma types, but I've noticed that this particular type seems to get at me more than some of the others. And so kind of at least starting there to be more mindful for this staff, what is that like for you and for you and for you? And so for me to help navigate that. I would say that, 99% of our clients are complex trauma cases. And so I think just, having weekly supervision, having, team meetings and group supervisions and training, all of those things to really help them be as prepared and, but yeah, I think it wears on folks for sure, so.
But yeah, I think that's just an observation that I noticed. It's like you go into it thinking, oh, there's this kid and they experienced this trauma, but some of these kids have dealt with, at 7 years old, dealt with what somebody else might experience over the whole lifetime, or never even as much at such a young age.
Mm-hmm.
One trauma after another.
Yeah, for sure.
Brad and I would like to do more of these, down the line. Are there any topics within STS that you would want to see us address? Anything you heard today that like, oh, I would like to dive deeper into this?
I think with like how it impacts work productivity is helpful, and how to balance that. That's like, I think we're naturally like compassionate and empathetic people, so sometimes it's possible to be like too lenient, and how do you balance all of that? I think it'd be nice to do one that focuses on residential care too, separately from
Yeah.
foster care work, because sometimes we feel like we can even be the cause of trauma when we're restraining children. Or the other day I had to pry a kid off of their mother when they were trying to leave. So it's a little bit different. So I think to have one specifically for residential care would be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad and I are taking our own experiences from our
Yeah.
division, obviously, and
Yeah.
we're not even claiming to be experts in STS for our division, but, no, absolutely, you're right. Okay. Well, thank you all.